Hello, my name's Elaine. I'd like to share with you my story of postnatal illness. As a little girl, I always wanted a baby brother or sister. I loved children. When I was 10, I was absolutely delighted when my mum announced that she was pregnant. She got fatter, she got bigger, and I would remember being so excited that we went shopping in old baby shops for exciting things like pads, which I didn't know what they were for, but I was so excited. When Mum was 9 months pregnant, I remember going to bed one night, and the following day I'm told, Elaine, you have a baby sister. I went to the hospital and Mum was literally cradling baby Claire in her arms, wandering around. That was it. Pregnancy and birth, a doddle, nothing to it. Little sister Claire had read all the right books. She knew as a baby you slept, you occasionally were smelly, but that was soon sorted. And my own maternal instinct just grew and grew. I went on to become a teacher for children with severe and profound learning difficulties, a job that I adored. But all the time, I wanted my own baby. I went on to marry a colleague, and shortly after we were married, I was thrilled to become pregnant. At the time, I thought I was the only woman in the entire world. No, let's make that the entire universe ever to have conceived a child. But that's how it feels. So special, so unique, so exciting. I remember that within 3 hours of conception, it seemed the coffee table was heaving under the weight of pregnancy and birth guides, pregnancy and birth diaries that I filled in religiously. I planned, I prepared and balanced on my perch of perfection. I remember going to the antenatal classes and being so excited about all this new knowledge. And yet at my classes there was one lady who'd also had a baby before, and she was the voice of doom. Each week, a kindly midwife would advise us about aspects of the birth, about breastfeeding, and this one lady would have this miserable account of, breastfeeding, they were this big, it was dreadful. We talked about the birth, it had been dreadful, terrible. One week, the midwife suggested to us that one or two of us in the group might actually suffer a little from postnatal depression after the baby was born. This lady, she'd had it. Boy, was it awful. Moan, moan, whinge, whinge. I'm now actually quite ashamed to admit that I thought, typical. She was just the type, wasn't she, to get postnatal depression. The moaner, the whinger, never had a good word for anybody. Not like me. I'd written lists. I knew what was coming. Little did I know. The birth date came. It was planned for a certain Friday in April, and because it was on a list, it had to happen. I was so excited to go into labour, and all my Christmases and birthday wishes were about to come true. The birth started off as it was supposed to. It was all written on the list. I had the water birth suite, and it was all going to be this wonderful, almost ethereal quality of panpipe music playing, and almost a Mother Earth experience. It did start out that way, but after hours of labouring in the hot water, I had to get out of the pool. Sadly, the baby was in distress, and from what had been a really lovely experience, turned into a traumatic one. It seemed that out of the delivery suite, their doors seemed to be everywhere, and suddenly from this lovely, calm and peaceful environment, there was panic, there was mayhem. Yet to this day, I still can feel this midwife stroking my cheek, stroking my hair, and her calm, reassuring voice that everything was going to be okay. I would soon have my baby. Always remember the importance of being there. The baby was born, but he was in distress. The cord had been round his neck and he was whisked away. And almost instantly I felt that people were popping my bubbles of expectation of what was supposed to happen, what was going to happen. I was wheeled off to theatre because I'd had complications, and all I can remember is blackness. When I awoke, it wasn't the vision I'd had. Instead, every part of me hurt. Even the ends of my hair seemed to. I felt battered and bruised. When my baby son was handed to me, I did bond with him, regardless of the soreness I felt. And within 24 hours, I was back up and ready to be a mum. I remember a doctor saying to me that I should think myself lucky, because had it been a home birth or even 20 years ago, I would have been dead. And that was it. No one spoke to me about what had actually happened at the birth for a long time to come. Start a bit again. Within 24 hours, I was up and about and cradling my little boy, ready to become the mum I always had wanted to be. Yet I do remember a doctor commenting to me that I should count myself lucky, that had it been a home birth or 20 years ago, I'd have been dead. And that was it. No one ever spoke to me about the birth. And I would have liked someone just to have explained what had happened. It was nobody's fault other than Mother Nature. As the weeks went by, little Dominic, he hadn't read the same books as me. His version of a good sleep was about 2 hours. And almost immediately, I put myself into this hamster wheel of everything had to be perfect. My personality is I like to be busy, I like to be efficient, I like to be organised. So even though I had this little baby who was constantly demanding of me, the cushion still had to be right. I still had to make meals. I still had to be busy, efficient and organised. And looking back, right from those early days of going home, I really did put tremendous pressure upon myself to be the perceived perfect mum. Yet, little by little, I was losing my grasp on reality, letting small things become big things. Yet the week I was due back at work, when Dominic was about three months old, he was very, very poorly and was rushed into the local hospital with suspected meningitis. He was a very poorly little boy. 10 days later, we both left the hospital and I had to go back to fully breastfeeding him, and I'm due back at work. Not a good recipe for success. In the weeks that followed, I attempted more and more to be the normal Elaine, the efficient Elaine, all against fighting with a little baby who was still recovering and very much awake early hours, every hour. After a couple of weeks, my GP actually recognised that I was suffering from postnatal depression. How did she realise? Well, there are a whole range of symptoms, but for me, I was exhausted. Not just that feeling, oh, I need an extra lie-in, but I was truly exhausted. Even though I was surrounded by very caring friends and family, I felt so lonely, a real sense of isolation. It was like I was in a glass bubble and nobody could get through to me. At times I felt so aggressive and so angry about life, and even the smallest of thing that I would fly off the handle for. I also had so many irrational thoughts. I'd just make up great big mountains out of things that really were molehills. I had so much nervous energy. I used to feel that a person suffering from depression would want to sit in a darkened room and not go out. That might be the case for some people, but I put on this facade of having to do this, having to go there, having so much to do. And yet I was so emotional as well. 1 minute high as a kite, the next minute sobbing my heart out and feeling suicidal, and no rational thought in between. Very, very difficult for those around you to cope with. I was put on antidepressants, which I didn't mind because it was explained it could be a medical imbalance and they may help. I also attended a support group. Yet I still felt that I was such a failure. I felt so guilty. I had what I'd always wanted. I wasn't, all due respect, a single mum living on her own with no help, no support. I desperately wanted my baby. I was surrounded by loving people. I was a capable woman. I'd help people look after their disabled children. Why couldn't I look after my own? So I couched all my feelings with the facade of I'm fine, I'm wonderful, I can do anything. But in reality, I was spiralling down and down and down. I began not to sleep. Why bother? Because as soon as I did that thing, that baby would wake me up again. I banished my husband to his spare room and told him that he needed sleep. I didn't. I could cope. And I basically lied to him that I was sleeping. He really didn't know what he was coming home to. Someone smiling with meal on the table, or someone still in a dressing gown with a grumpy face and yelling at him, "Get your own food." Very difficult for everybody concerned, and I pushed away the help and offers that were there. Just before Christmas, as the mum I had longed to be, I completely flipped. I woke up this particular day feeling everything was okay and had a pleasant morning with little Dominic. Just before lunchtime I went upstairs, and as I did so I felt it was like the pictures of the tsunami. There were 7 months of sleep deprivation, all these stresses, all this negativity just came crashing down on me. At that moment I quite easily could have smacked my baby's head against the wall, suffocated him, anything. Luckily I didn't, but I wasn't that close to it. I put him in his cot and I knew I needed help. The next 24 hours I went through all kinds of extreme behaviour. I went walkabout in the early hours wearing simply a night dress. It was cold and wet and in December, and they found me curled up on a church doorstep. I sat on the kitchen floor and carved my legs up with a knife. I just had completely lost all my grasp on reality. The following day, the community psychiatrist came out to see me and suggested I needed some care in hospital. I was happy to go. It was as if everything in my home environment was coming crashing down on me. Even a simple decision as if to make tea or coffee was too much. I needed rescuing. I needed help. I spent the next 2 months in a psychiatric hospital. Sadly, I was separated from my son. Even though I was still breastfeeding, I was told I'd chosen a bad time. It was Christmas and there wasn't the staffing for the local mother and baby unit, so we had to be separated. I now realise that that really wasn't the best form of treatment, and I strongly suggest that we must have more specialist mother and baby units where mum and baby can be helped to keep that bond that's so vital together. I was tried on various forms of medication, but finally it was actually ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, that put me back on the road to recovery. I will never know, was it actually the anaesthetic going through me which taught me to relax again, or was it the actual treatment that worked? Either way, it meant that when I was back on the ward, I could visualise that wonderful sinking feeling of the anaesthetic going in, and I learnt to relax again. I learnt to sleep again. And once I'd learnt to do that, little by little by little, I got my life back again. I wanted to see my son again. I wanted to recover. And I did. My recovery certainly didn't happen overnight. It took months, if not a couple of years, before I felt that I was fully better. I went back to work full time, and finally life settled into the way that I'd always wanted, to have a happy family and also to carry on with my career as well. I wrote a book about my experiences because I wanted to show others that even though postnatal depression can have a devastating effect on you, with time, care, support and treatment, you can get your life back again and be an incredible mother to an amazing child.